Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker finds himself at the center of another controversy after a left-wing activist media outlet reported that he paid for a girlfriend's abortion back in 2009. Will this be the smoking gun that Democrats need to tank Walker's campaign? Well, we'll see. I have with me Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Tim Donner, to discuss this whole fiasco.
That's what it is. Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
Yeah, and like you said offline, never a dull moment with Mr. Herschel Walker, right?
Certainly not. Yeah, people will not die of boredom.
Yeah, definitely. So Walker, he's got another sort of a scandal of sorts, assuming that the report from the Daily Beast is actually true about this abortion, which there's some questions about that. But whether it's true or not, what do you make of this new revelation?
Well, I mean, this could really go into one extreme direction or another. On the one hand, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back because people say, look, he's a mess. He doesn't speak well. He's had terrible troubles in his past. He has had mental illness, which he says he's overcome, but people aren't sure. And this could just be just one scandal too many. On the other hand, at the other extreme, this could be an example of one toke over the line, shall we say, in the sense of being in a long line of scandals that are creating a scandal fatigue. In other words, these are the same tactics that were used against Trump for the last 7 years. They tried to take him down with everything from Russia collusion to whatever you constitute to be the kitchen sink. So are they doing to Herschel Walker what they did to Trump? And might that not create even more of a pushback from right of center voters? I mean, after this latest revelation about the abortion came out, Jeff, Herschel Walker had a record fundraising day, 180,000 in one day. So there can be a kickback from this, and we'll find out really not until November 8th, because it's really quite a fluid race with all these new scandals coming out week after week. And I might add that his opponent, Raphael Warnock, is not free of taint either.
Yeah, exactly. And to some, it might actually feel like a lot of what they did to Trump, but there is a little bit of a difference. None of Trump's kids came out against him. Now, Christian Walker came out, and I don't know if you saw what he did on Twitter and the videos that he made. You did? Okay, yeah. So yes. He's claiming that there are a lot of lies being told here. So do you think there might be a chance that this isn't the last shoe to drop, that there might be something that the left has up their sleeve, or do you think this might be what they're banking everything on?
Well, what his son has come out and said is at one time both the oddest and yet most predictable twist in all of this, because on the one hand, his son, Christian Walker, is an outgoing homosexual. He's gay. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, he's a conservative. He was heavily involved in the group Gays for Trump. So ideologically, he's that. It's not as rare as you think, a gay conservative, but it is in the media because, of course, if you're gay and you're conservative, that's sort of a contradiction in terms, right? You can't be both. But in any case, so that's what makes it odd, and yet it's predictable because even Herschel Walker has stipulated that earlier in his life, he was in the grips of mental illness, which may or may not explain instances of domestic violence of which he's been accused, a very difficult marriage, and an absentee father, according to his son, Christian Walker, who just absolutely laid him out on a video on social media. Again, will that just create more pushback on the right? Or will that take the undecided voters and say, I think there's just too much of a risk with this guy? I worry that this will be seen as another Roy Moore situation
Mm.
where this was a very winnable seat for Republicans. They should be ahead by several points with a generic candidate. But like in the Alabama Senate race in 2018, where Republicans should have won easily, Roy Moore. There were so many revelations about the Republican candidate, Judge Roy Moore, that he lost because the allegations seem credible. So from the Republican standpoint, I think they're worried that this is another Roy Moore situation. But this is a seat that they have to have,
Yep.
probably, if they expect to win control of the Senate.
Yeah, and it would also explain why the activist media is attacking him so hard. But on the other side of that, because I mean, yeah, because Roy Moore is one thing, but the difference here is, and you alluded to it earlier, Herschel Walker, and I have no problem saying this because Herschel Walker said this about himself. Everybody knows that Herschel Walker was trash when he was younger. He's admitted it himself. He's
Right.
admitted to being a bad husband. He's admitted to being violent and having mental illness and being abusive. So even with this new revelation, it seems to me, Tim, that a lot of this is just kind of baked into the cake. We already knew who Herschel Walker was before because, I mean, and I don't know if he ever planned on running for politics, but he had already gotten ahead a lot of this stuff. So even though he didn't talk about having paid for an abortion, and he does deny this, to be fair,
He does.
but even if he had and he admitted it, again, this is kind of okay, yeah, that tracks because this is what he talked about. This is the type of person he talked about being. So do you think that maybe it may not have any effect, whether to galvanize Republicans or to dissuade them or even independents?
Well, I think that the current political climate actually works to Herschel Walker's benefit because politics has become so tribal that honestly, people on both sides of the aisle really don't care that much about their candidate, just whether he has a pulse and is going to vote the right way. Let's be honest. I mean, Democrats were not upset when they found out that the Russia collusion hoax was a hoax that had been perpetrated by their side. That didn't upset them at all. Likewise, you know, Republicans weren't taken aback by the vicissitudes of Donald Trump, right? If the person's on your side increasingly in this tribal type of politics that we're in, the background stuff and what they did in their past and outrageous things they've said, drug use, all this kind of stuff doesn't really matter in this kind of climate like it has in the past. But let's also remember that he's running. I mean, you talk about a contrast in styles. First of all, let me just drop in that I think the fact that you have two black men running against each other for the upper chamber of Congress, and the fact that that by itself doesn't draw headlines, as I wrote on LibertyNation.com, I think says a lot about how far we've come. Because sure, two black guys running against each other, what's so weird about that? Well, 10 or 20 years ago, it would have been headlines, just the fact of it. But remember that Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, is a preacher. He's in the line of Martin Luther King at Ebenezer Baptist Church, which I'd say that place is as legendary as Herschel Walker is as a personality and a figure. I mean, Herschel Walker is a heroic figure in Georgia, having taken the Georgia Bulldogs to their first national title in almost 40 years, winning the Heisman Trophy, arguably the best college player of all time. He's a heroic figure in his home state. Not to mention, Jeff, he played in the national championship game with a separated shoulder.
Right.
So the legend just grew. So, you know, you've got one legend against another in a sense, but the huge oratorical advantage that Raphael Warnock has in their one upcoming debate, which is going to occur just in these next few days. It's going to be interesting how Walker handles it, because what he said was, look, he's a preacher. I can't compete with him. He wears those expensive suits and he's well put together, and he is. And he's a preacher. So how does Walker sort of explain away his own, sort of inarticulate presence, his bad grammar, stuff like that, against a guy who I think Barack Obama might be jealous of Raphael Warnock's oratorical skills?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and a lot of people had some misgivings about Walker during the primary season. They cautioned against choosing him because of this checkered past, but also because you're right, he isn't very articulate, and he is prone to gaffes. I mean, he does make a lot of gaffes. Do you think that maybe, I hate to use the term, but do you think maybe a more milquetoast or less controversial candidate would be ahead of Warnock at this point, or do you think it might still be neck and neck?
One word answer to the first question: yes. Yes, I think that Georgians were taken aback by Trump's outward aggressive support for Herschel Walker, which in the end was what made the difference. I think it was a standard issue, vanilla, white bread, conservative Republican who, like the governor, Brian Kemp, says the right things, is polished. In his race against Stacey Abrams for governor, he's way ahead because he's a polished professional politician. He knows what to say, when to say it, and how. Herschel Walker's not that at all. So he becomes an explosively controversial figure. But you know what? This is really, he stands in almost as a surrogate for Trump, because if they lose Georgia, if Republicans lose Georgia in a race they could have won, and it cost them a Senate again, which it did in 2020 when they lost 2 seats that they should have won, then Trump's currency in the Republican Party is going to take a serious hit, because he's the one responsible for Walker running, and he will be blamed for losing. That will in turn strengthen the hand of a guy like Ron DeSantis. So, just like Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, which is an extremely controversial endorsee of Donald Trump.
Yeah, the base didn't like that one.
No, base didn't like him. As a matter of fact, Dr. Oz is the only one I can ever remember Trump introducing at one of his rallies, and who was then booed by the Trump faithful. That's not a good sign. That doesn't engender good turnout, shall we say. So, with Oz and Herschel Walker, if they lose one or both of those races and miss the chance to control the Senate, Trump is going to get blamed. It's just that simple.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I hadn't even thought of that, like how it'll affect Trump's star in the Republican Party. But that does make sense, because 2 candidates that he endorsed that people had misgivings about, if they do lose and it costs Republicans the Senate, I could see that. I can see some people on the right giving him the side eye for that. So it does make sense. But last question, because I want to talk about Democrats just a little bit. What does it say about how people perceive Democrats, or how Democrats have handled things since they've been in power, that a guy like Herschel Walker would be neck and neck with Raphael Warnock, with all of his baggage, with the fact that he's not very articulate and all the other stuff? What does it say that he's still within striking distance about the Democrats?
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it: glass half full and half empty. Half full is, boy, are we lucky the Democrats are in such a weak position with such a weak president, or else Walker would be blown out of the water. The other half empty angle is, he should be winning this race easily. Republicans should be taking back the Senate seat without breaking a whole lot of a sweat, because in 2020, the climate in Georgia was very different. The Stacey Abrams-like progressive narrative had taken hold in Georgia. Trump had lost the election, and then he had objected to it in so many ways and refused to concede. The circumstances under which they lost those 2 Senate seats on January 5th, 2021, have changed a lot, because now people have seen what the Democrats have done with the power. And so Georgia's converted more back to a traditional conservative state than it was, as reflected in Brian Kemp's comfortable lead in the gubernatorial race over Stacey Abrams. So the half empty is, hey, There was an old line. What was it from? What movie was it from? Where? No, it wasn't. It was a Saturday Night Live skit, and Michael Dukakis is debating George H.W. Bush, and George H.W. Bush is another one of those things like 1,000 points of light, stay the course, meaningless rhetoric. And Michael Dukakis looks at the camera and goes, I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. Maybe that's what Raphael Warnock is saying in a tight race here. I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. But Republicans are saying, I can't believe we're not winning this race.
Right.
Look, it's not a deep red state anymore, but it's certainly purple.
It's red enough, I
skewing
guess.
Towards red, yeah. So it's Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. Those are the 4 states. The Republicans have to win 3 of those. They have to win 3 of those 4 and hold on to the others for them to control the Senate. Let's see. I think Oz and Walker are really on the knife's edge as to whether they're going to win. I think Nevada's looking good for the GOP. Arizona, not so much. But they should, again. There's Blake Masters, the candidate out there, who's another Trump endorsee, who was again controversial, who people again said if they'd nominated someone more sort of mainstream conservative, they'd probably win that race. This way, we don't know. So, again, Trump is on the ticket in the sense that how much does his support mean? Does it put him over the top, or does it prevent them from going over the top?
Great. Yeah. Well, it's less than 4 weeks, so all will be revealed. But I'm sure either way it goes, you and I are going to have probably a very interesting conversation afterwards. But we'll wait until then. But thanks again for joining the program, Tim.
Thanks, Jeff. Had a lot of fun.
Awesome. And remember, the show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thank you so much for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe space.
You only did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.